Hello, I'm Molly, and this is a new channel that I'm starting. I have no idea how to start this first video, so this should be interesting. I'm a voice actor and the host of a horror movie review podcast called Final Girl Friday. I'm very uncomfortable on camera. Um, if you can't tell, this channel is something I've been kicking around in my head for a long time. And by kicking around in my head, I mean wrestling with myself, because it's something that I feel is important. It is something that I really want to do. But I also have somewhat crippling body issues, namely to do with my mouth. And I've let that stop me from doing a lot of things in the past. So I'm here saying, screw it. My desire to do this trumps my intense hatred of my face. If you're someone who listens to the show or follows me on social media, a fair warning, this channel will have very little to do with horror movies. I mean, they are my primary interest, so I'm sure that there will be some bleed over, but the purpose of this channel is to create a space where I can talk openly and publicly about living with agoraphobia in a way that will hopefully help other people who are living with what I'm living with. I've been living with agoraphobia for 13 years. When I first became agoraphobic, I was housebound for over a year. It was easily the most difficult year of my life, and it took me several years afterward to get back to a place where I would consider myself high functioning. Then last summer, I had a pretty big relapse. I don't know if relapse is the accurate word, it's just the only word that I know to use. I'm not a psychiatrist. I see psychiatrists, but I am not one. So any terminology that I use or any ways that I may describe things are just based on my own personal perception and experience. So last summer I had this massive relapse and I am housebound again. And this is the first time that I have been housebound since I became agoraphobic over a decade ago. And I've been struggling really hard to pick myself back up. Logically, I know that I've gotten through this before. You know, I've made it through an even worse situation than the one that I'm in now. But I don't know if it's because I'm older or because I'm just really tired of dealing with this, or if it's because I've been living with it for so long, it's just kind of become deeply ingrained in who I am. But it's been a very difficult road trying to pick myself up and get back out into the world and live like a quote normal person. So I thought that maybe as part of that, for lack of a less cheesy word, journey, I would create this channel and talk a little bit about my experiences. Agoraphobia is one of the most misrepresented and underrepresented mental illnesses out there. And I think especially with the pandemic, there are more agoraphobics in the world now than there ever have been. And so now more than ever, it's very important to, kind of establish and maintain a dialogue. And I know that there are plenty of people out there talking about it online. It's just I've never been one of them, and I guess I've gotten to this point where I feel like I should be. I hope all of that made sense. Also, I talk with my hands. So for this introductory video, I thought I would just talk a little bit about how I came to be agoraphobic, to the best of my understanding, and what I'm currently doing to manage it. And then I have no idea what other kinds of videos I'm going to post, or if anybody's even going to see this channel. Just saying hello. Last side note, I promise, but I'm also a very private person. So talking about some of this stuff isn't going to be the easiest thing in the world for me. Blanket apology for any awkwardness, is all I'm saying. 13 years ago, I was living in Omaha, Nebraska, working in a record store, going to college. I had a great boyfriend, great friends. I lived in a nice house with roommates in a pretty nice neighborhood, and life was going pretty well for me. But I had terrible teeth. A big part of that was just really poor hygiene and bad decisions I made when I was younger. It's a whole big backstory, but basically I left home at 15 to travel the country because I thought if I didn't, it would somehow disappoint Jack Kerouac. So I traveled around the country for years and just didn't take care of my teeth. It had nothing to do with hard drugs. I think a lot of people assume that it did when they see me and realize I don't have teeth. It was nothing to do with that. It was just bad decisions I made when I was younger, neglect. And then I suffered 2 instances of facial trauma over the years that succeeded that neglect. And by the time I was 27, 28 years old, the time had come for me to make a decision. I could either try to pay thousands of dollars for reconstructive surgery, or I could just pay $1,000 and have the teeth all yanked out of my head. And I was in so much pain, from all of my dental problems that it just seemed like the best option. So I opted to have all of my teeth removed. I left Nebraska. I left my job and my boyfriend and my friends and my life to go to Ohio and have the surgery, which that's a whole other story. But my father lives in Ohio, and I went and I stayed with him while I was having the surgery. In order to have all of my teeth removed, I needed to be anesthetized, and I was terrified of anesthesia because of the root mental illness that lies at the heart of everything I am and do, which is somatic symptom disorder. I'm sure I'll probably do a series of videos on somatic symptom disorder, or at least my experiences with it at some point. But to kind of briefly summarize, if you're not familiar with it, which I wasn't familiar with it for the first 10 years that I had it, somatic symptom disorder is a condition where you become so hyper-focused on physical symptoms, sometimes a specific physical symptom, that it causes you immense distress. It can interfere with your ability to function. You're just constantly obsessively thinking about one or more physical symptoms that scare you, or that cause you duress. And in my case, my somatic symptom disorder is all related to my digestive system. I'm terrified of vomiting, basically. I don't really know how else to say that in a way that doesn't sound stupid. I'm utterly terrified of throwing up, and I have been since I was a kid. That fear developed into somatic symptom disorder. And, one of the fun things about this disorder is that you can be so hyper-focused on that physical symptom that you can actually manifest it. Anyway, as I said, I'll talk a lot more about that in the future. But for now, just bear in mind that I am utterly terrified of and quite preoccupied with my fear of vomiting. So when I went to have my oral surgery and have my teeth removed, it was explained to me then that the reason why I had been instructed not to eat anything prior to the surgery was that when you're anesthetized, your reflexes are temporarily stopped or paused. I'm not a doctor. I was told that there was a risk, if there was any food in my stomach, that I might vomit while I was anesthetized. That fucking mortified me. That fear prevented them from being able to anesthetize me because I couldn't calm down and there was great risk to my heart. They ended up taking the IV out, putting me in the recovery room. I went back 5 days later and had all of my teeth removed while I was wide awake. That was an incredibly traumatic experience on multiple levels. People have nightmares about all of their teeth falling out or their teeth being ripped out. It's a very popular trope in body horror. It's something that people are terrified of, and I did it. And then you also have the vanity issue and the body issues that come along with having all of your teeth removed when you're in your 20s. And I don't think that it's just limited to people in their 20s either. I think that people, no matter what age you are, whenever you have all of your teeth removed, there's a lot of negative stigma surrounding toothlessness, and so there was a whole bunch of shit that went along with me losing my teeth. When I was in recovery from that, my father had a stroke right in front of me. That was the first time that either one of my parents had ever had like a near-death experience or, a major health event. I had never had that. I'd never experienced that before, and neither had he. And it was traumatic for both of us. Obviously, most especially him. I'm not trying to focus on how his stroke affected me, but it did affect me. During all this, like while my father's recovering from the stroke, I'm recovering from this surgery, I stopped leaving the house. In part because there wasn't a reason to initially. We had family who were helping kind of take care of us at this time. But the other reason that it took me a while to realize was depression. I had just lost all of my teeth in a traumatic surgery at a very young age, and my father had nearly died in front of me. So I was dealing with a lot of trauma, and I didn't realize that I was dealing with a lot of trauma at the time. When you're in it, I think it's really hard sometimes to have that perspective. And I just didn't realize how big of an effect it had all had on me. And I just stopped leaving the house. I started spending all of my time online, primarily online gaming. So I was playing a lot of World of Warcraft. I also got into Second Life for a little while. I was drinking about a full pot of coffee a day and living off of 3 or 4 of these Keebler chocolate chip oatmeal cookies. And then every Friday, my aunt would bring us Wendy's, and I would have like maybe 1 or 2 chicken nuggets and a handful of fries. And that was it. That was all I was eating. I don't know how the hell I survived off of that for so long. So I dropped a ton of weight. I'm 5'4", and within 6 months after my surgery, I weighed 98 pounds. I had tons of digestive issues, which exacerbated my somatic symptom disorder, that I was now living with very real digestive issues, not just the ones I was sort of, conjuring up in my head. And I was crying all the time. I was weak. I was fragile. It was a mess. I didn't even realize that I hadn't left my house in so long. And my father, he recovered from his stroke. And he came into my bedroom one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to go grocery shopping. It's been like a year since I've done that for myself. Do you want to come with me?" My instinct answer was, yeah. Realizing it had been a very long time, like nearly a year since we had done our own grocery shopping. I thought, yeah, okay. I got up, I got dressed, we went downstairs. I walked out onto the front porch of our house. The light and the air and the outside world hit me. And it was all incredibly overwhelming. And I had, for the first time in my life, a debilitating panic attack. I had never had a panic attack before. I think it was a word or a phrase that I had probably thrown around, but I did not know what panic attacks were until that day when I tried to walk outside. I felt like I was dying. I had no idea what was happening to me. And I dropped to the ground and scurried backward into the foyer. Could not breathe, could not process what was happening. And from that point forward, everything changed. I mean, obviously everything changed when I had the surgery, but I wasn't aware of those changes, not completely. Once I had that first panic attack, everything changed in a way that was impossible for me to ignore. I was housebound for 14 months. My weight problems got worse. I no longer had a period. You could count my ribs from across the room. I had essentially become anorexic, but without the psychological implications of the word. I lost the majority of my friends. Because I stopped maintaining my friendships. My family became increasingly frustrated with me. I went 140% into the fantasy worlds of my online gaming. Like, I just stopped living in the real world. I just kept sinking deeper and deeper into this void. Then I had a sort of major turning point. I had gotten up and gone into the kitchen to refill my coffee, and I had opened the silverware drawer to get a spoon. And I sort of woke up. I have no idea how long I had been standing there. But I sort of came back to myself and realized that I had been staring into the silverware drawer at the steak knives, vividly imagining committing suicide. And the first thing I thought when I came out of that was, okay, I need help. I had never had suicidal thoughts before. This was a brand new experience for me, and it scared the hell out of me. So I thought, okay, I have to do something. I have to make some kind of change. This is not good. That was what it took for me to realize 2 years after all this started that I had really gone down a dark road. It took me 2 years of living at, and like I said, I was 98 pounds. And I didn't even realize how much weight I had lost, how unhealthy I looked, how unhealthy I felt and was, I was ignoring it. When I had that hallucinatory moment, I realized that something needed to change. And that was when I started actually actively talking about what was going on with me to the people in my immediate vicinity, my family. It took me another year to reach a point where I could leave Ohio. I'll talk more about that in another video, like everything that I did to be able to get in a car and go on the interstate, for 10 hours. Well, it actually took 3 days. I had to be kind of hot potatoed across the country from hotel to hotel. But anyway, the point I'm making is that was the hardest period of time in my life. I had never experienced anything like that before, and I hadn't experienced anything like it since, until last summer. I had been struggling with my agoraphobia, which I now understand is just a symptom of PTSD. I get that. It took me a really long time and several psychiatrists to realize this, but my agoraphobia is just a symptom of PTSD. And it's all exacerbated by my somatic symptom disorder. It took me such a long time to understand that, And I had been living with untreated PTSD for over a decade. Here I am now, all these years later. I had a very difficult year last year. I had a couple of health scares. I'm also living on my own. I've been living on my own for the last 2 years for the first time since I became agoraphobic. And there were several very stressful things that hit me over the summer related to my work and just financial stuff. All the financial and career related stress mixed with a couple of health scares that I had kind of back to back over the summer just mushed together and exploded into, just this rain of depression. And before I knew it, my boyfriend came to visit me. He lives out of state. He came to visit me, and we walked down just a few blocks away to the movie theater that used to be in my neighborhood. It's shut down now, unfortunately. But we were sitting in the theater. The movie started. I started feeling a sort of sensory overload from the film. I was experiencing some vertigo, and I started to have a panic attack in the theater. That panic attack, much like the attack I had on the porch all those years ago, that was it. I was done. It got more and more difficult for me to leave the house without incident. And now I haven't been more than a block away from my home since, I want to say, around August of last year. I lost my part-time job because I couldn't physically get there anymore. Now I'm doing voiceover full-time, which comes with its own set of problems. I love it. I love it more than anything in the world. Voiceover is my passion, but it's a difficult career. Things have calmed down in the last couple of months, but I went through a period there where for several months I was having panic attacks every day here at home. The difference between now and then is that I'm aware this time of everything that I have going on in my head. I know exactly what's happening up here. I was so fixated on the physical symptoms of my anxiety, which I hadn't felt for a long time. I was so fixated on those physical symptoms that I started to make myself sick. And the more I made myself sick, the worse my anxiety became. The more I made myself sick, the worse my anxiety became, and so on and so forth until it just snowballed. And now it's fucking infuriating because I am more aware of what's going on in my head than I ever have been. But for whatever reason, I find that I'm less capable of powering through it, trying to just get back out of the house and live like a normal person, be able to work out of my home, be able to go places with my friends and my boyfriend, like be able to have a normal life and take care of myself. And the building that I'm living in was recently bought out by these new people who've changed everything. They jacked up the cost of living here. All my neighbors moved out. I want to be able to leave, is what I'm saying. I want to be able to get the fuck out of here, and just go someplace that is a better, more nurturing environment, where I don't want to be here anymore. But I can't leave because I'm essentially housebound again. So I think that brings us up to speed. As far as the positive steps that I'm taking and trying to take, I have an amazing psychiatrist. She has been a godsend, and we're working together every couple of weeks with behavioral exercises and therapy, and it's been very good, to have her in my life. She also put me on Propranolol. I don't know why this is not something that people talk about more often, treating certain types of anxiety and PTSD with beta blockers. It's been amazing. The beta blockers really help me manage the physical side of my anxiety, which makes it a lot easier for me to manage the psychological side of my anxiety. So I am working on all of that. I'm taking those steps, but it just, I've been through it before, and I'm pissed off that I have to go through it again. So anyway, very long story, not short at all. That's kind of my agoraphobia story. Obviously, there are a ton of details that I omitted. I don't want to sit here talking for 2.5 hours. I actually do kind of look forward to exploring some of this stuff in the future. Again, I have no idea if anybody's going to want to, listen to all of this or watch these videos or anything. But when I first became agoraphobic, social media was still kind of finding itself. YouTube existed, but it had only been around for a couple of years, and it was primarily like tutorials and cat videos. And Facebook was pretty much like, the best option in terms of like a social media platform. I didn't really have anybody. I didn't have anybody that had gone through this. There was this really cool blog, I can't remember the name of it now, but there was this amazing blog that someone kept where it was like a sort of stream of consciousness, like poetry journal about living with agoraphobia. There were a couple of bloggers that would talk about their experiences and like things that they would do to kind of help them leave the house, but it was a very small community of people. Now, things are different. My understanding of my illness is different, or my illnesses, I should say, is different. My ability to articulate it is different, has changed and grown, and the internet has changed and grown a lot. I know that I'm not alone. Even though I feel alone, a lot of the time. Somatic symptom disorder, agoraphobia, these are not things that you hear people talk about. And it can be really easy to feel alone when you're living with them. So I really wanted to talk about it, to stop being so private, to open up a little bit and share my story. And hopefully somebody else out there who is living with something similar will find this video or this channel, and they'll feel less alone too. So yeah, that's my info dump. That's who I am and what I live with, in part. I try not to let my mental illness define me. You know, I do have varied interests, but right now, the illnesses that I'm living with are very heavy on my mind. And I wanted a place to talk about that and let you know if you're watching this and you're also living with somatic symptom disorder or agoraphobia or PTSD or any combination thereof, or if you had your teeth removed when you were young for whatever reason. There is somebody out there that has that same strange cocktail, and I'm here, and I'm going to be talking about it. My slobs and I would like to thank you for watching. The slobs really help me, probably more than anything.